Every single watermelon video online tells you the same thing. Give it space, water it well, let the sun do its job, and you will get watermelons. What they never tell you is why most backyard growers end up with a vine that covers half their yard and melons the size of a softball. Here is the truth. Growing a watermelon is easy. Growing a big, red, dense, dripping with juice watermelon that actually tastes like summer, that requires one specific thing that almost no beginner video content covers honestly. It is not a secret fertilizer. It is not a special variety. It is not expensive equipment. It is vine management. And the specific method I'm going to show you today, the one that champion growers and serious backyard producers use, but almost nobody talks about in beginner content, is the single technique that separates a 20-pound melon from a 4-pound disappointment. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will have everything you need to grow the kind of watermelon that makes people stop and ask how you did it. Before the method, you need to understand exactly why the standard approach to growing watermelons produces mediocre results for most backyard growers. Watermelon is a vining plant with one biological priority that does not align with what you want from it. Left entirely to its own devices, a watermelon plant will produce as many vines as it possibly can, cover as much ground as possible, set as many fruits as possible, and then divide its available energy among all of those fruits equally. That sounds productive. It's not. A watermelon plant has a fixed energy budget for fruit production, determined by root size, leaf canopy, soil nutrition, and sunlight exposure. That budget does not increase just because the plant sets more fruit. It gets divided. A plant that sets 8 small watermelons produces 8 small watermelons. A plant that has managed to direct all of its energy into 2 or 3 fruits produces 2 or 3 melons that are dramatically larger, denser, sweeter, and more flavorful than anything the same plant would have produced on its own. This is the foundational logic behind what champion watermelon growers have understood for decades, and what almost every beginner video fails to teach you. You are not just growing a plant, you are managing energy flow. Every decision you make from planting day to harvest day either concentrates that energy into fewer, better fruits or dilutes it across an unmanaged vine. The method we are covering today is about concentration, one primary vine, strategic fruit selection, controlled energy flow from the soil to the root to the vine to the fruit you chose. By the time we reach harvest, that fruit will be everything a backyard watermelon should be. And before we get into step 1, drop your country in the comments. I want to know where in the world you are growing watermelons. Whether you're in Texas, Australia, India, Brazil, or the UK, tell me your country right now. Let's see the full map of where this method is being put to work. Step 1. Choosing the right variety, the decision that determines everything. The variety selection step is where most beginner watermelon content either gives vague advice, choose a variety suited to your climate, or just lists a few popular names without explaining what actually distinguishes them. Here is what that distinction actually involves, and why it determines the ceiling on how big your watermelon can get. Watermelon varieties fall into a loose spectrum based on maximum potential fruit size, from personal size varieties that top out around 5 to 8 pounds through standard backyard varieties that typically reach 15 to 30 pounds to exhibition varieties that can exceed 100 pounds under ideal conditions. For the method in this video, the single vine energy concentration method, you want a variety in the middle range. Specifically, a variety with a mature weight potential between 20 and 40 pounds. This is the range where the method produces the most dramatic visual results, melons that are noticeably, obviously larger than anything a neighbor growing the same plant without this method would produce, but within a size range that is achievable without greenhouse conditions or professional growing infrastructure. The 3 varieties that perform best within this range for the backyard grower are Crimson Sweet, Charleston Gray, and Georgia Rattlesnake. Crimson Sweet is the standard for a reason. It produces oval, striped fruit with a thin rind and dense, bright red flesh with a high sugar content. It matures in approximately 80 days and is forgiving of the learning curve that comes with managing this method for the first time. Most seed sources and garden centers carry it reliably. Charleston Gray is the variety to choose if you are in a warm climate with a long growing season, particularly the American Southeast, parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and the tropics. It matures more slowly than Crimson Sweet, but produces fruit with exceptional flesh density and sugar development. The rind is thicker and more uniform in color, pale gray-green, which makes it easier to read ripeness indicators that we will cover in the harvest section. Georgia rattlesnake is the option for growers who want the biggest potential fruit in the 20 to 40 pound range. It is a heritage variety with light green skin and darker stripes, producing elongated fruit with an exceptional flavor profile that most modern commercial varieties cannot match. It is less commonly available at garden centers. You'll likely need to source it from a seed company, but it's worth the effort for growers who want a true heirloom watermelon experience. One category to avoid for this method: seedless varieties. Seedless watermelons require the presence of a seeded pollinator variety nearby to produce fruit, and their pollination requirements add complexity that conflicts with the tight vine management approach we are using. Seeded varieties in the ranges described above are easier to manage and more responsive to the energy concentration technique. Step 2. Soil preparation that actually changes fruit size. Most watermelon guides say, add compost to your soil before planting. That's true, but it's not specific enough to make a difference. Here is the specific soil preparation framework that produces measurably larger fruit, and the reason each element matters. Watermelons are one of the heaviest feeding crops you can grow. A single vine covering 12 to 15 feet and producing a 20 to 30 pound fruit needs to pull an enormous quantity of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium from the soil over the course of 80 to 100 days. If those nutrients are not available in sufficient quantity, the plant compensates by producing smaller fruit and shorter vines. The goal of soil preparation is to create a nutrient reservoir that the plant can draw from progressively through the growing season, not a single application of fertilizer that delivers everything at once and then depletes. Here's the specific approach. In the planting area, an approximately 4-foot circle centered where your plant will go, dig down 12 inches and remove the soil. Add 4 inches of finished compost to the bottom of this hole. Mix the removed soil with an additional 2 inches of compost and return it to the hole, creating a mounded planting bed that sits 3 to 4 inches above the surrounding ground level. This mound serves 2 functions. The elevated center drains more freely than flat ground. Watermelons grown in soil that retains too much moisture at the root crown are significantly more vulnerable to crown rot, which can kill an established plant seemingly overnight. And the loose, amended mound soil allows the root system to expand rapidly in all directions through the early season, establishing the nutrient access network that will feed fruit development later. At the base of the planting hole, beneath the compost layer, add a handful of bone meal. Bone meal is a slow-release phosphorus source that supports root development, and later in the season, fruit sugar development. Unlike synthetic phosphorus fertilizers, bone meal releases gradually as soil organisms process it, providing a sustained supply rather than a spike. The surface of the mound should be covered with 2 to 3 inches of dark mulch, straw, shredded leaves, or wood chip mulch. This layer serves 3 purposes simultaneously. It retains moisture in the mound during the long, hot growing period. It moderates soil temperature, keeping the root zone in the optimal range of 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And it suppresses weeds that would otherwise compete with the watermelon vine for the nutrition you just built into the soil. Now here's the element that almost no backyard watermelon video covers. Lay black landscape fabric or a sheet of black plastic over the entire planting mound before you plant. cut an X in the center for the planting hole. The black surface absorbs solar heat and raises the soil temperature inside the mound significantly above ambient ground temperature, typically 8 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit in full sun. Watermelons are a tropical crop that evolved in the Kalahari Desert of Africa. They don't just tolerate heat, they require it for optimal fruit sugar development. A root zone that is consistently warm all season produces sweeter fruit than one that is growing in cool soil, regardless of how well you manage everything else. This single addition, black plastic or fabric mulch over the mound, is used by virtually every serious watermelon producer and is mentioned in almost no beginner content. Step 3. Planting in the critical first 4 weeks. Start watermelon seeds indoors 2 to 4 weeks before your last expected frost date. Plant in biodegradable pots, coir pots, peat pots, or newspaper pots that can go directly into the ground at transplanting time without disturbing the roots. Watermelon roots are sensitive to transplant disturbance, and any mechanical disruption of the root system at transplanting causes a setback that can delay fruit production by 2 or more weeks. Plant 2 seeds per biodegradable pot, ½ an inch deep. Once germinated, thin to 1 seedling per pot by cutting the weaker seedling at soil level, never pulling, which disturbs the surviving seedling's roots. Transplant into your prepared mound after your last frost date, when night temperatures are consistently above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Here is the first management decision of the method. When your transplanted vine reaches approximately 12 inches in length, which happens within the first 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting, pinch out the growing tip of the main vine. This sounds counterintuitive. You are removing the point of forward growth, but here is what happens when you do it. The plant immediately redirects its energy into the lateral branches, the secondary vines that emerge from the nodes along the main stem. These lateral branches are where watermelons actually develop. By pinching the main vine early, you are encouraging a bushier, more branched growth pattern that will carry more female flowers and give you more options for selecting your primary fruit. This is step 1 of the energy concentration method, and it sets up everything that follows. Step 4. The single vine method in action. Once your lateral branches have developed to 8 to 10 inches in length, select the 2 strongest, healthiest-looking secondary vines. These are your primary production vines. Remove all other lateral branches by cutting them cleanly at the base with a sharp, sanitized pair of pruning shears. Do not tear them. Do not snap them. Cut cleanly and do it on a dry morning, never when the vine is wet, because watermelons are susceptible to fungal infection at wound sites, and a clean cut on dry tissue heals faster and resists infection more effectively than a rough break on a damp vine. You now have 2 primary vines extending from the central plant. Along the first 1/3 of each primary vine, the section closest to the crown of the plant, remove all lateral shoots that emerge from the nodes. These early node shoots divert energy before it can reach the female flowers that develop further along the vine. Removing them is the second concentration step. You are building a clear energy channel from the root system to the productive section of each vine. Beyond the first third mark, allow the lateral shoots to remain. These secondary branches along the outer 2/3 of each primary vine will carry female flowers. Female flowers are identifiable by the small proto-melon at the base of the bloom, a tiny round swelling that will become the fruit if successfully pollinated. Male flowers have only a simple stem at the base with no swelling. When female flowers open, they are receptive to pollination for approximately 1 day, typically in the morning hours when pollinators are most active. To support reliable pollination without depending entirely on insect activity, hand pollinate any open female flower by using a small paintbrush or cotton swab to transfer pollen from an open male flower to the center of the female bloom. This hand pollination detail is one of the most consistently skipped steps in beginner watermelon content, and it is one of the most impactful. A female flower that is not fully and effectively pollinated produces a fruit that fails to develop, softens, and drops within a week or 2 of setting. A female flower that is completely pollinated, with pollen transferred from multiple male flowers to every part of the stigma, produces a fruit that develops uniformly and reaches its full genetic size potential. Once you have successfully pollinated female flowers on each of your 2 primary vines, you have one more critical decision to make, and it is the one that most people find the hardest to execute. When the developing fruits are the size of a tennis ball, large enough to be clearly visible on the vine but still early in their development, select one fruit per vine. The best candidate is the most symmetrical, most round, most uniformly formed fruit. Remove all other developing fruits on that vine. 2 vines, 1 fruit per vine, 2 total fruits from the entire plant. This is the concentration point of the method. Every nutrient, every water molecule, every photosynthetically produced sugar that this plant generates for the rest of the growing season flows into those 2 fruits. No division, no competition, maximum concentration. The result is a fruit that develops to its full genetic potential in size, in flesh density, and in sugar content. Step 5. Watering strategy that builds sweetness. Here is the watering framework that most watermelon content either oversimplifies or gets wrong. During vine establishment, the first 3 weeks after transplanting, water deeply every 2 to 3 days. The goal is to encourage deep root development by keeping moisture available at 8 to 12 inches of depth. Shallow, frequent watering keeps moisture near the surface and trains the roots to stay shallow. Deep, less frequent watering pulls the roots downward into the soil volume where temperature is more stable and moisture is more sustained. During active vine growth and flowering, from week 4 through fruit set, maintain consistent moisture with deep watering every 3 to 4 days in average conditions, more frequently in high heat. Inconsistent moisture during this phase causes blossom drop and failed fruit set. Here is the watering shift that almost no beginner video explains and that has a direct and measurable impact on fruit sweetness. Beginning 2 weeks before your expected harvest date, or when the fruit has reached approximately 80% of its expected mature size, begin reducing watering frequency significantly. Not stopping completely, but reducing from every 3 to 4 days to once every 7 to 10 days. This reduction in water availability during the final ripening window concentrates the sugars that the vine has been producing and transporting into the fruit all season. When a watermelon is well watered right through to harvest, the sugars are diluted by continued water uptake. When watering is reduced during the final ripening window, the fruit's existing sugar content intensifies without dilution. This is the reason that watermelons grown in warm, slightly drought-stressed conditions, like the classic watermelon growing regions of the American Southeast and parts of sub-Saharan Africa, are reliably sweeter than watermelons grown in irrigated conditions with consistent moisture through harvest. You can replicate that effect deliberately in your own backyard by managing the final watering window, and most competitor videos on watermelon growing never mention it. Step 6. Feeding schedule that drives size and flavor. The fertilizer schedule for maximum watermelon size is a 2-phase approach that mirrors the plant's changing nutritional priorities through the growing season. Phase 1 runs from transplanting through the first 2 weeks of vine growth. During this phase, the plant is establishing its root system and building the vine structure that will carry its fruit. Nitrogen is the primary nutrient need. It drives cell division, leaf development, and the rapid vegetative growth that creates the canopy the plant needs for photosynthesis. Apply a balanced fertilizer, roughly equal parts nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, at half the label rate every 2 weeks during phase 1. Half rate in a healthy, compost-amended soil prevents the excessive nitrogen that produces lush vine growth at the expense of fruit production later. Phase 2 begins at the moment you see the first female flower opening. This is the signal that the plant has shifted from vegetative growth into reproductive mode. From this point forward, stop all nitrogen-dominant fertilization. Switch entirely to a fertilizer with a low first number and high second and third numbers, a bloom booster or fruiting fertilizer. A 10-30-20 or 5-30-20 NPK ratio is ideal. Here is why this phase change matters specifically for watermelon size and sweetness. Phosphorus in high concentrations supports flower development, cell formation, and sugar transport within the plant. Potassium controls water regulation, sugar synthesis, and the final ripening processes that produce the flavor profile you want at harvest. These two nutrients working together during the fruit development phase are what build a dense, sweet, deeply flavored melon. Excess nitrogen during fruit development does the opposite. It tells the plant to keep growing vegetatively, diverting energy away from fruit development and producing bigger, leafier vines attached to smaller, blander fruit. Feed with the high phosphorus, high potassium formula every 2 weeks from first female flower through 2 weeks before harvest. Then stop fertilizing entirely and begin the reduced watering regime.
Step 7. How to tell when your watermelon is actually ripe. Harvest timing is where more backyard watermelon seasons end in disappointment than any other single point in the process, and it is where competitor content is most consistently vague. Top it and listen for a hollow sound. Every watermelon video says this. Here is the problem. A hollow sound simply indicates that the fruit has some airspace. An underripe watermelon sounds hollow. A perfectly ripe watermelon sounds hollow. An overripe watermelon also sounds hollow. The topping method on its own is an unreliable indicator. Here is the multi-signal system that actually tells you when to cut. Signal 1 is the tendril. Every watermelon fruit is attached to the vine, and near the fruit attachment point there is a small coiling tendril, a thin curling extension of vine. When this tendril dries out, browns, and shrivels completely, the fruit directly adjacent to it is at or near peak ripeness. Not a nearby tendril, the one immediately adjacent to the fruit stem itself. Signal 2 is the ground spot. The area of the watermelon resting on the soil surface, called the ground spot or field spot, changes color as the fruit ripens. On an unripe watermelon, the ground spot is pale green or white. On a ripe watermelon, the ground spot transitions to a deep creamy yellow or butter yellow color. The deeper and more saturated that yellow, the riper the fruit. Signal 3 is the skin surface texture. As watermelons ripen, the skin surface changes from slightly glossy to fully matte. A ripe watermelon has a dull, flat surface finish. If the skin still looks shiny in full sunlight, the fruit needs more time. Signal 4 is the fruit stem. A ripe watermelon resists easy separation from the vine. If the fruit detaches easily when you apply gentle upward pressure, it may be overripe. A fruit at peak ripeness holds to the vine firmly and requires a clean cut with a knife or shears for harvest. It should not pull or snap free. Use all 4 signals together. When the tendril is brown and shriveled, the ground spot is deep butter yellow, the skin is fully matte, and the fruit holds firmly to the vine, cut it. Not a day earlier, not a day later. Do not refrigerate immediately after cutting. Allow the cut watermelon to rest at room temperature for 2 hours before serving. Cold suppresses the volatile aromatic compounds that contribute to the flavor experience. A room temperature rest before eating or chilling for only 30 minutes before serving rather than hours produces a noticeably better flavor than a watermelon cut and immediately refrigerated. Step 8. The mistakes that ruin harvests and why they are never talked about. Before we close, here are the specific, non-obvious mistakes that collapse watermelon yields and that almost no video in this niche covers directly. The first is letting the vine re-root along the ground. Watermelon vines will root at nodes wherever they contact moist soil. Every secondary root system the vine establishes dilutes the nutrient flow from your primary root ball into the fruit you are trying to grow. Every week or two, gently lift the vine sections that are in contact with the soil and reposition them onto dry ground or straw mulch. This keeps all nutrient flow concentrated through the primary root system. The second is removing male flowers too aggressively. Some growers, seeing the abundance of male flowers on an unpruned vine, remove them to reduce the plant's reproductive energy expenditure. This is a mistake. Male flowers are essential for hand pollination and for attracting the bee activity that ensures complete female flower pollination. Never remove male flowers deliberately.
The third is placing the developing fruit directly on bare soil. As the watermelon grows, the portion resting on wet soil can develop flat spots, rind discoloration, and rot. Place a piece of cardboard, a straw mat, a folded burlap square, or a purpose-made melon cradle under each developing fruit. Elevating the fruit slightly and keeping it off wet soil allows the full circumference to develop evenly and prevents the ground contact decay that ruins the appearance and storability of the harvest. The fourth is cracking from late-season overwatering. Watermelons are 92% water. When a nearly ripe fruit takes up more water than the rind can accommodate, the rind splits. This typically happens when a heavy rain falls on a nearly ripe watermelon that has been in the reduced watering phase. The fruit absorbs the sudden influx of water faster than the rind can expand. In a backyard setting, cover ripening fruit with a floating row cover or clear plastic sheeting during rain events in the final 2 weeks before harvest. It takes 5 minutes to set up and prevents the heartbreak of a cracked watermelon after an entire season of patient management. 1 vine, 2 fruits, 1 season. That is what this method asks of you. And what it gives back is a backyard watermelon that tastes different than anything you've grown before, because you built the system that concentrated the entire plant's energy into what you harvested. Every step in this method exists for a reason. The early pinch creates the lateral branch structure. Selecting 2 primary vines concentrates energy flow. Removing lateral shoots along the first third creates a clear energy channel. Selecting 1 fruit per vine focuses everything remaining on a single developing melon. The 2-phase fertilizer approach mirrors the plant's own biological shift from vegetative to reproductive. The reduced watering in the final weeks intensifies the sugars the plant worked all season to produce. None of these steps are complicated. All of them are specific, and together they produce the kind of watermelon that makes people stop, look, and ask how you grew that in a backyard. This season, try the method. Trust the process. And when you cut that watermelon open at the end of the summer and see that deep, saturated red all the way to the rind, you'll know exactly why every step was worth it. Keep growing your garden.